California has a version of itself it works very hard to sell you. Progressive, transparent, the state that leads the nation. But there's a second version, and almost nobody talks about it. A nuclear meltdown worse than 3 Mile Island, hidden from the public for 20 years. Water rights secretly rewritten at a resort hotel with no voters, no legislators, and no public announcement. $500 billion in lithium sitting under a lake most people have written off as an environmental disaster. These aren't rumors, they're documented, sourced, and buried, not because the evidence doesn't exist, but because the official story is a lot more comfortable than the real one. 10 things California would rather you not know about, and the last one genuinely broke my brain. There's a version of California they teach you in school. Sunshine, innovation, the most progressive state in the nation. And then there's the version we're about to get into, which is a lot more interesting and a lot harder to look away from. 10 things California would rather you not know about. We're going to cover all of them, and the last one is the one that genuinely broke my brain, because it involves a lake that isn't even supposed to exist. Let's start with something that affects every single person in the state, and almost nobody knows it happened. In 1994, state water officials, water infrastructure contractors, and agricultural landowners arranged a secretive meeting at a resort in Monterey Bay, California. No public announcement, no press coverage. These groups, a mix of private companies and public agencies, rewrote California's water laws without any input from voters, taxpayers, or legislators. The result was a document called the Monterey Amendments, and it changed who gets water in California during a drought. The original law had an urban preference, a long-standing rule that in times of drought, the State Water Board would give urban areas where people live access to state water supplies before agricultural interests. That rule got erased in that room by people nobody elected, in a meeting nobody knew was happening. So who benefited? Through the Monterey Amendments, one family acquired nearly 60% of the Kern Water Bank, a critical water storage facility originally built with hundreds of millions in taxpayer dollars, effectively transforming a public resource into a private asset. That family is the Resnicks. You probably know their brands: Pom Wonderful, Fiji Water, Wonderful Pistachios. Under the deal concocted in Monterey, the purpose of this critical public resource was abruptly changed from ensuring ratepayer water security to providing the Resnicks Wonderful Company subsidiary with water for luxury crops such as almonds, pistachios, and pomegranates. Paramount Farms controls 58% of the Kern Water Bank and has used this share to profit during drought periods by selling water to urban water districts at a premium. So the water your tax dollars built the infrastructure for, they bought it cheap, and they sell it back to your city at a markup when it's scarce. The Resnicks farming operations use more water than every household in the city of Los Angeles combined. And here's what makes it sting even more. It's never been entirely clear why so much was given away to agribusiness in the Monterey Amendments, or why nothing has been done to fix it in the decades that followed, especially under governors who ran on progressive platforms. Now, if a secret meeting that handed away your water rights feels like a lot, just wait, because the next one involves a nuclear meltdown. The Santa Susana Field Laboratory, covering 2,800 acres, sits atop hills between the Simi and San Fernando valleys in California, just 30 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. In the summer of 1959, something went catastrophically wrong there, and the people of Los Angeles had no idea. A clogged coolant channel in a 20-megawatt nuclear reactor led to the melting of 30% of the fuel elements in the reactor core. Radioactive materials were intentionally vented into the atmosphere to prevent the reactor from exploding, releasing nuclear radiation into the skies above Los Angeles. For 14 days, radioactive material was vented into the open air. And here's where it gets worse. An independent advisory panel found the incident released nearly 459 times more radiation than the similar one at Pennsylvania's 3 Mile Island in 1979. 3 Mile Island is the one everyone knows. It's in the history books. Santa Susana, 30 miles from downtown LA, is barely a footnote. The partial nuclear meltdown was kept secret from the public for 20 years. Working with nuclear safety expert and then UCLA professor Daniel Hirsch, a student discovered documentation that the partial nuclear meltdown had occurred, releasing up to 459 times more radiation than the infamous meltdown at 3 Mile Island. It took a college student digging through internal documents to blow the lid off it. Radioactive iodine was released in doses estimated up to 100 times that of 3 Mile Island, enough to cause various types of cancers and thyroid abnormalities, particularly in children under the age of 15. Radioactive iodine only has an 8-day half-life, but that's more than enough time to get into the local dairy cows and contaminate the milk supply. And the site still hasn't been fully cleaned up, so we've got secret water deals and a hidden nuclear meltdown. Let's talk about something you've probably driven past 100 times without realizing it. There are oil wells hiding inside fake buildings all over Los Angeles. Not metaphorically, literally fake buildings with no windows, no tenants, no actual purpose other than to hide what's behind the wall. One building on Pico Boulevard is a windowless facade concealing over 50 oil and gas wells, with a derrick that rolls on tracks between wellheads behind the exterior. Occidental Petroleum disguised another drilling site as a synagogue in 1966. Beverly Hills High School had a working oil derrick disguised as a tower on campus. Most Angelenos drive past these daily with no idea they're looking at active extraction sites dressed up as architecture. The city decided it was easier to hide the oil industry in plain sight than to explain it to the people living next to it. Now here's one that connects to a tax bill you're probably paying more of than you should be, because some of the biggest corporations in California are still paying property taxes based on what their land was worth in the 1970s. Proposition 13 passed in 1978 and capped property tax increases for existing owners, which sounds reasonable on the surface. But the loophole is this: commercial property only gets reassessed when someone acquires more than 50% ownership. So large companies simply structure their transactions to never cross that threshold. The result is that corporations including Disneyland, Intel, and Chevron are being taxed on property values from 5 decades ago, costing the state an estimated $8 to $12 billion a year in lost revenue. That's money that doesn't go to schools, roads, or public services, and it's completely legal because the loophole was never closed. There's a through line starting to form here, right? Secret meetings, hidden infrastructure, rules that protect the powerful and cost everyone else. Keep that in mind because the next one goes back even further, to the gold rush. California's gold rush is taught as this triumphant chapter of American expansion. What doesn't make the lesson plan is that the miners used mercury to extract gold, and that mercury is still moving through California's ecosystem today, more than 160 years later. An AP investigation found that abandoned mercury mines are still polluting waterways, putting at least 100,000 people who eat local fish at risk. The contamination disproportionately harms indigenous communities whose traditional diets rely on those fish. The poison from a 19th century gold rush is a present-day public health problem, and it gets almost no attention. Speaking of things that get almost no attention, let's talk about what happened in Los Angeles in the 1950s, because it connects to a stadium you've definitely heard of. In the 1950s, the city of LA used eminent domain to clear a Mexican-American neighborhood called Chavez Ravine. Families were told they'd be displaced temporarily to make room for a public housing project, and that they'd be able to come back. That promise was never kept. Nearly 1,800 families were displaced, and the land that was supposed to become public housing was handed to the Dodgers instead. Dodger Stadium now sits on that land. California has been weighing a reparations bill over it, and the families who were pushed out or their descendants are still waiting. And while we're talking about things California would rather quietly move past, here's one from 1871 that most people in the state have never heard of. In October of that year, a mob of roughly 500 people stormed Los Angeles' Chinese Quarter. By the end of the night, 19 people were dead. Of the 25 people indicted, only 10 stood trial, 8 were convicted of manslaughter, and then every single conviction was overturned on a legal technicality. Nobody was ever punished. It remains one of the largest mass lynchings in American history, and it happened in Los Angeles. It's not in most California history curricula, it's barely acknowledged. And the reason it matters isn't just historical, it's that the pattern of erasure around it is itself part of the story. We're getting close to the last one, and I promised it would break your brain a little. But before we get there, if you're finding this as wild as I am, drop a comment with the one that shocked you most so far. And if you want more of this, the hidden, the buried, the things that were never supposed to come out, subscribe, because we do this every week. Now, there's a part of California that has been actively trying to leave California since 1941. And it's not just a meme or an internet movement, but it's official county government business. Northern California counties have pushed for decades to break off and form a separate state called the State of Jefferson. In September 2013, Siskiyou County became the first to formally pass a resolution supporting secession, and other counties followed. These are actual county-level government votes, not online petitions. The frustration driving it is real. Rural northern counties feel systematically ignored by a state government that's dominated by the coastal population centers. Whether you agree with their politics or not, the fact that parts of California have been trying to leave for over 80 years through official channels is something most Californians have no idea about. And then there's the water story that connects to Los Angeles' growth itself, because the city didn't just find water, it took it. When Los Angeles diverted the Owens River in 1913 to fuel its expansion, it drained Owens Lake dry. The dry lake bed became the largest single source of PM10 particulate pollution in the entire United States. That's the fine dust that gets into your lungs. Fixing it, building wind barriers, flooding sections of the lake bed, and laying gravel has cost over $1 billion in dust mitigation. LA's growth was built on water it grabbed from somewhere else, and the environmental damage from that grab is still being paid for today. Okay? The last one, the one I said would break your brain. And I meant it. The Salton Sea is California's largest lake. If you know anything about it, you probably know it as an environmental disaster, shrinking, toxic, full of dead fish, and plagued by dust storms that make the air unbreathable. It's been called one of the worst ecological failures in the western United States. The US Department of Energy confirmed in late 2023 that an estimated 18 million metric tons of lithium, often called white gold, valued at roughly $540 billion, is trapped in the geothermal brine beneath the Salton Sea. The find is one of the largest known lithium brine deposits in the world and could supply enough material for 375 million electric vehicle batteries, potentially making the US self-sufficient in the critical mineral used in batteries, smartphones, and renewable energy storage. Let that sit for a second. The lake that everyone wrote off as a catastrophe is sitting on top of enough lithium to power every electric vehicle in the United States, and then some. 3 major companies are already advancing lithium extraction projects in the region, with local communities balancing hopes of economic revival against environmental concerns. And here's the twist on top of the twist. The Salton Sea is actually a highly saline inland lake, which originally served as a natural drainage basin for the Colorado River. It was accidentally created in 1905 when the Colorado River breached an irrigation canal. It was never supposed to be there. The lake is a mistake that is now sitting on top of $500 billion worth of the most sought-after mineral on the planet. So here's where we started. California, the transparent, progressive, forward-thinking state. And here's where we ended up. A state where water law was rewritten in secret at a resort, where a nuclear meltdown worse than 3 Mile Island was hidden for 2 decades, where oil wells hide inside fake buildings on city streets, where the largest mass lynching in American history barely gets mentioned, and where the most toxic, written-off lake in the West turns out to be the biggest lithium deposit on the continent. The thing that ties all of this together isn't conspiracy, it's just the gap between the official story and the actual one. That gap is almost always more interesting, and California's gap is enormous. If this video hit different, share it with someone who thinks they know California. And if you want to go deeper, we've got a video on the hidden history of the American West that connects a lot of these threads in ways that'll genuinely surprise you. It's right there. Watch it next.